Hello, how's it going, guys? I will go ahead and wait for a few people to join before we get started. So when you're in here, when you can hear me, let me know. We'll give it a couple more seconds and then we will get going. Looks like we can see some people coming in. Go ahead and post in the questions Slack channel that you can hear me, and I will make sure to be looking at that. So use hashtag questions as always. And once I see people posting there, I will know that you can hear me. Looks like there are people typing. Cool, we're good to go. All right, so to get started, let's go ahead and look at some of the stuff that we talked about last time. There are a couple things that people were struggling with that I want to go over specifically, and we will go from there. So start sharing my screen. So here is the blessed page that you were all looking at, I'm sure. And up here we can see the nav bar, and the nav bar is something that a lot of people were really struggling with. So I want to point out one thing that we can do to make this a little bit easier. So if you right click on something and you go to inspect in Chrome, right now, right responsive, so we'll make this a little bit wider. Here we can see all of the HTML and CSS that's related to each aspect of our nav bar. So this is the div, the unordered list, the list item, and here we have specifically the link to home. And if we click on that, we can see exactly how this original template is using the CSS to target this element. So in this one, which might be a little bit different than yours, they are using our custom .nav list item A, so for link. So if you wanted to, and you were trying to overwrite this CSS right here, you could copy this right there, paste it into your text editor in the CSS section. So it'd be .na VBA our custom .nav li a, and you could overwrite that specific class. Another thing you can do is if you want to come in here and just play with what would happen if you were to change that class, is we can actually change it in inspect. So what if we wanted to make those links green? We can do that right there. What if we wanted to give them a little bit more padding? We can give them 40 pixels of padding, and effectively you can test everything that you would want to within this little guy that's called inspect element. So let's look just a little bit more deeply at how this works. So we can right click on any element, and assuming right clicking is working, you can say inspect, and it will highlight that element in the HTML over here. And when that HTML is highlighted, it's going to bring up all of the CSS that is associated with that particular element. And as we go down here, we see a lot of stuff that's been crossed out. So why do you guys think that would be crossed out? And the reason is because this, let's see, font weight 500 is being overwritten up here, font weight 800. So you can see this is targeting an H1 element. And down here, it's also targeting an H1 element. Looks like that's on line 5, and that's later on line 4. Well, it's all minimized, so it's all going to be on the same line. But basically, this up here, this font weight, comes after this font weight down here in the CSS. Therefore, this one wins. And so this inspect generally goes in kind of reverse order. So it goes from most specific to most broad. And as you get down to the bottom, most of the stuff is going to be crossed out because it's being overwritten somewhere. And if you want to look at something specific to this CSS, you can also use this right panel. And this is an alphabetical list that goes through and shows you every single aspect of that CSS for that element. And that's going to include CSS that's coming from other classes. So if we have something on the body here, we would also see it here because technically this nav bar is inside of the body. But I wanted to make sure you guys understood how you can make those changes. And one cool thing that you can do is you can also change the HTML. So you could create a new title, hit enter, and you can see what that would look like. So I don't want to see any of you guys going to Donald Trump's tweets anymore and photoshopping them and changing them. Oh, I don't know his real Donald Trump. Because you should, instead of photoshopping his tweets, be inspecting and typing what you want him to say. The photoshops are just not very high quality. And I would encourage you to do that. We actually will make that a part of the lesson. Learning how to use inspect element to overwrite things. One other thing that people have been wondering about is this right here, this highlight color. So we see here we've got 0085A1. What is that? So we're going to open up a text editor. That's a sneak peek of your homework. Don't look at that. And we're going to look at what a hexadecimal color is. So if you're using a normal number, right? We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And as we know, that's base 10. So then you basically start back over and you get, in the tens column, you get 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you have tens, you have ones, and if you grab a 1 from the tens and a 9 from the ones, that's 19. We all understand that. What's different is the way hexadecimal colors are used is the name hexadecimal comes from the word 16. So instead of using base 10, we actually use base 16. So it goes 0 through 9, and then A, B, C, D, E, F. So you have those 6 letters in addition to the 10 numerals. And then again, A, B, C, D, E, F. And then all that a hexadecimal color is it's 3 things. It's red, and then green, and then blue. And you're saying how much of each color it should be, where 0 is the lowest and F is the highest. So if we say FF 0000, you're going to have an F in the 16s column, an F in the ones column, and then zeros for green and blue, and that will end up being pure red. If we have 00 FF00, that is green. And as you can imagine, 0000 FF is blue. Let's test that out just really quickly. So here we have, let's take this title. And let's just edit color. And we'll just do for now FF00. So that is red and green all the way up to the top, and no zero. No blue. And as you can imagine, if you were to say 000000, it's all black. So what does that actually mean? Let's find a different example. Let's look at this guy down here. That's great for knowing how you can do red, green, and blue, but how can you find a specific color? Well, inspect actually lets us click on this little guy right here. We can choose anywhere along this color spectrum, and it will spit out the hexadecimal and change it to us. And that is all it is. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but how can you change the cursor on the window? I think you're talking about how you change something from a link to not a link. And basically the answer to that is that HTML will recognize when there's an A tag, or later in JavaScript, we'll learn about buttons. And it will recognize, hey, this is surrounded by an A tag, therefore it should be a link, and it will turn the cursor to the little clicky hand automatically. You can do stuff, you can actually set that manually. You can say, let's look at this guy. inspect, and then we'll have to choose hover, and we'll say cursor pointer. And now that's not working, but it's only grabbing that one element. But theoretically, you can say cursor pointer, and it will turn it into a little hand. It's not working right now, but that's generally speaking how it works. And if I had more time to debug, we would go more into that. But yeah, that's basically CSS, and we're actually going to leave CSS from here and go a little bit more into the nitty-gritty for a minute. And we're going to learn about Git, G-I-T. And Git is something that, as a programmer, you will use every single day. You'll use it all the time. And basically what it does is it lets a lot of people work on the same files and the same code, and it basically mashes them all together. So let's go ahead and look at, oh, that's a bad link. So here is the homework for another boot camp we did. And over here, we can see, if we look at the contributors, here are all of the people who have contributed to this homework. So what happened? OK, actually, we've got some questions that we need to clear up just really quick. So when you shrink the page down and you make it really narrow, let's see. I noticed the website page, home, about, and so forth disappear and replaced with a clickable menu. So basically what's happening here is there's some JavaScript that's written that says once you get below a certain size, change the nav bar to this different nav bar. And luckily with Bootstrap, that's already been written for us, so we don't have to worry about it. We can talk about how to create that manually, but it uses something that we call, let me see if we can find any here. Actually, let's go ahead and inspect the header. We should be able to see it. Oh, no, it's not showing us anything. But basically, there's a way that we can go, we'll go over later, that you can write specific rules for specific sizes. So you can say, when the viewport width is this size, use these CSS rules, and when it's this size, use these CSS rules. So that's why you'll notice things change from size from one to the other. And we'll go over that a little bit later. The other question is, can you explain things like display block or display inline? The general rule is everything that's not text is by default display block. And if you make it inline or inline block, it will go into the same row instead of stacking on top of each other. That's what display block is. And then overflow is basically just, hey, if this element is overflowing, what do I do? Do I turn it to ellipses? Do I hide it? In modern web development, we shouldn't be using that very much because we should be having all of our divs resize and reshape themselves so there isn't overflow. But we'll go over that stuff more in depth later. So really good questions. Let's get back to Git for just a little bit. So say, for example, you are an engineer at a company. There are 150 engineers working at this company, and they're all working on the same code base. If it were 50 years ago, maybe the solution, well, maybe not 50 years ago, 20 years ago, the solution would be everybody would save a file, and then you'd email it out to everybody. Everybody would download it, and you'd have to wait for each other to make changes before you do anything. And as you can imagine, that's just not going to work very well. So basically, some really smart people created this software called Git. And what Git does is, imagine, it does a couple things. It's called version control. Imagine you're in a video game, and you're getting to the place right before you're about to go up against a big boss, and you're like, oh, this might get nasty. I need to save. Git lets you do that. It lets you take a snapshot of your project at a certain state and time, and then you can go back to that at any other time. And then in addition to that, it will let you take your snapshot, take somebody else's snapshot, and push them into the same code base. And as long as there are no conflicts, as long as you guys weren't changing the same code, it will just mash them together, make all the new stuff, overwrite all the old stuff, and it works beautifully. There's some issues, as you can imagine, when you get really in depth, but for most of what we need to know, it just works. And the thing that I want you guys to understand is there are two different things. One is Git and one is GitHub. So Git is just a technology that we use to basically take snapshots of projects and to mash these different snapshots together. What GitHub is a place that we store all of those things. So GitHub is just, if you could upload a bunch of Word documents somewhere and store them all in one place, that's all GitHub is. It's a place where all this code is stored, and you can download it and you can push it up like a good developer, and you can pull it down and play with it and mess around with it. So we're going to go over really quickly what a traditional flow would look like with Git. And Git is a really complex software that will let you do a lot of really advanced things. So obviously, we're not going to go into all of them. I don't know if I've ever met anybody who understands all of what Git does. But the basics are things that you'll do every day. So we're actually going to start from Ben's project, which is the JavaScript Minicamp Homework 1. Don't worry about what the homework is. We're just saying, look, here is a file. So once we're on this page, there are two things that we can do with it. We can clone it, and that is basically making a copy to our computer, or we can fork it. And forking it is making a copy on our own GitHub. So the difference is, if I clone this, and we'll show you how to clone it in a minute, I can make all of the changes that I want, but then when I try to push it back up to GitHub, it's going to try to push it up to Ben's GitHub. So if Ben hasn't given me access to mess with his code, then it will just reject it when I try to take it from my computer and put it back online. Whereas if I fork it, and you can see, 300 people have forked this. Oh, I already have a fork, but let's use an old repository I had. And that's basically making a copy of it. And now this is totally mine. Now I can do whatever I want with this. Ben has no control over it. I can invite new people to it. It's totally mine. So if you guys ever hear something about Wikipedia forking or Git or Bitcoin forking, that's basically saying there's a rift in the community, and they're saying, we're not going to work with the same code anymore. We're going to go do our own thing. So that's what forking is. And then the same way, you can clone this, and you can pull it down to your computer. But before we get into cloning, we actually need to talk about the command line. So we're going to open a couple windows at the same time and start to look at what the command line is. Ooh, lots of Excel going on. Sorry about that. All right, so here I'm going to go in my Finder on my right, and then in my command line on my left, I'm going to go to the same place. And disregard what I'm doing right now. So basically, what you're looking at on one side is you're looking at Finder folder on my computer, and on the other side, the desktop folder on my computer in Finder, and on the other side, you're looking at the desktop folder in my computer on the command line. And what I want you guys to understand is that these are actually the same thing. So if I hit LS on a Mac, I believe it's PWD on a Windows machine, and we'll actually link you Windows people to a Linux tool that you can use. So all your commands are the same. So you can just use a Linux or Unix terminal. So you don't have to worry about the differences yet. We'll pretend like the world's perfect and everybody's using the same machines for a minute. If I say ls, it's going to list all of the files that are in the current directory that I'm at. So in this desktop folder, I see project, and I see image.png, and I see amazon.pdf. As you can see, it's the same thing. On mine, the files show up in white, and the folders show up in blue. And then what I can do is I can use cd or change directory, and I can change directory into project. And all that that does is it's essentially double-clicking on this project. And now if I say ls and list all the files, you can see that all the files are the same. Index.html, custom.css, there's a CSS folder, there's a contact.html. We're looking at the same thing. So we could, for example, cd into CSS. That's just looking at that. You can see some bootstrap in here. If we do cd ... that will go back. That'll go up a folder. So basically cd dot is saying cd change directory into the current folder, which doesn't make sense because we're already there. And then you can do cd ... and that will go back one folder. So that will go one folder higher in my computer. Or I could say cd ... and it's actually, I don't go that far back, but in theory, you could do that. You'll never do that, so don't do it, but it works. So let's go back to ls. And we can also do pwd on a Mac, and I believe that's dir on Windows, and that will show us the full file path of where we're at. So we started out in users, and then Austin Allred, that's just my folder, desktop, project, and we're in the same place here. And one thing that will help you guys out a little bit is you can say cd, and you can actually just drag in a full file path if you want to. And your computer's smart enough to know that, okay, this folder is at users, Austin Allred, desktop, project, CSS. So if you want a quick way to figure out where a file's at, that's something that you'll use a lot. Is you can go on a Mac at least, Git info, and it just opened up behind. But if I were to go find that, it will show the full file path as well. So that is the basics of how you can get around your computer. It's just ls, cd where you're going to go, cd ... If you want to create a folder, you can use make directory. And that just popped up there. You can cd into it. You can go back out. Basically, you can navigate your computer the same way in a command line as you can using a Finder. And why is that important? Well, that's important because a lot of the time as a developer, you'll need to run scripts out of your command line. So there might be a time when I need to say, is there a JavaScript file here? I think there might be. So we can say node new file.js. We can only say that in the terminal, and it's going to spit out the results of new file.js, which is a file I created that conveniently adds 1 and 1, should you ever need to know what 1 plus 1 is. But this terminal window is kind of your key to the outside world. And you can do whatever you want to on your computer from within your terminal. We can even open something up which opened up this folder again. Let's see what we've got. Let's do, actually, so we can open new file.html, and it's going to open that up in Chrome. There's nothing in it. But yeah, it's your entire world. And so now that we know how to navigate around in our terminal, let's go ahead and go to our desktop. So let's go cd ... We're in project, cd ... Now we're in desktop. Sorry, I have do not disturb turned on, but it's not working. And now let's go here to this project that I just forked, and we're going to clone it. And you guys will have some more setup to do to set up your Git, but we'll just link to instructions for that. And to clone something, all we do is say git clone, and then you're going to copy and paste that URL right there. What it's doing now is it's basically going out to GitHub, it's grabbing that, and it's downloading it to my computer. So now if we say open dot, we open it in Finder, we can see, hey, there's JS Minicamp Homework 1. All of the files, all the folders is exactly as it was on GitHub, and now I can do whatever I need to with it. So let's say, let's open up exercises.js in Sublime. We'll do some of this later, but return num times 10, and that's a good solution for that one. And now we want to push it back up. So we cloned JS Minicamp Homework 1 from my personal fork of the project. We can say ls to show us all the files. We can see the folder that we just pulled down, JS Minicamp Homework 1. And if you hit tab, if you just kind of start typing and something's unique and you hit tab, it'll work. So I just said cd space JS and I hit tab. And since there's nothing else that starts with JS, it's going to autocomplete that, which will save a lot of time. And now we're there. We're going to say clear and get it back up to the top. So here I have my Git repository. So I can say git status. So actually, let me be clear. When I say Git repository, all that I mean is that as I make changes here, maybe I say, put in a little comment. Git knows that I've made a change to that file. So if I say git status, which is something that you'll do a lot, it says, hey, look, here's this thing that's been modified. And this next series of commands is something that you're just going to have to memorize. And I'll try to explain what's happening as we do this. So Git knows that there are changes, and we've saved those changes as far as the computer goes, but Git doesn't know that we have saved those changes. As far as Git knows, everything's just off in this file, and it doesn't know what to do. So we can say git add exercises.js, and that's saying, hey, Git, monitor this guy. Make sure that this is the guy that we want to update. We'll do git status again, just so you can see what's changed. And now it says, oh, OK, it's been modified, but I actually know what's going on. Before we hadn't told Git what was happening. And then we can say git commit -m and leave a message that shows what was changed. So we can say added a new comment. And you have to start and end with a quotation mark. And it's going to say, OK, great, we got it. And then to push it back up to GitHub, you just say git push origin master. And I know this is a lot, and those are a lot of commands, and there's no way you're possibly going to memorize that by looking at it once. Don't worry. It's something that we'll have a lot of practice doing, and a lot of what our homework is over is basically going over this exact process again and again and again to make sure we all know what's happening. So let's go back to Ben on GitHub, and let's find something else to do it with. So here is actually the first homework that we did. You guys will remember that. It's the one with all the pictures. And instead of cloning it and pulling it down directly to our computer, let's fork it. And let's make a copy over to our personal GitHub. It'll take a second. And now, haha, I own this project, and it's mine, and I can do whatever I want with it. So let's clone it to my desktop. We'll open up the terminal, clear it. And I am going to cd Austin Allred/desktop. Oh, shoot. Oh, I need to go cd users/optional/desktop. And we'll have to go over Git a lot. But for now, so we've forked this, made our own copy on GitHub. Now let's pull it down to our computer, cloning it, shoot. Okay, so we can see that ls web intro 1 is now on our computer. Let's change directory into it. And now we can open that. There's some shortcuts to do it, but I'm not going to worry you guys. So we'll just we'll open our desktop, and then we're just going to drag this down into Sublime or whatever text editor we have. And then we can make our changes to it. Here's a README. So the README is what we'll display on GitHub. And let's make some changes. Let's say 1, 2, 3. Let's go through the process of committing again. So first, change into it. Git status. We can see that things have changed. Git add. This time we're going to do git add dot. And that will tell Git that we've made changes to those files. Then we're going to commit, which is a save. And then we're going to git push. Actually, this time we're going to say u origin master. And all that the git push -u origin master right here, that just makes it so that from now on, I can just say git push, and it remembers that. So there's going to be a lot of repetition, and we'll link you to the place that you can see to do that. And we're actually going to stop right here, even though it's been a really quick lesson, and just get a lot of practice forking, cloning, making changes, add, commit, push. And I'm sure most of the work will be in debugging things that go wrong. But that is the next thing that we need to work on in order to advance, in order to get comfortable with the terminal and the command line, and getting used to Git and GitHub. And this is going to be a lot to bite off, a lot to chew on. There's just no other way to go about it, because you can't teach it one step at a time. You have to be able to do all of it. Yeah, we've talked about the difference between the Windows command line and Apple Linux. We're actually going to link people to a Bash utility for Windows so that everybody will be able to use one command line for now, just because that will keep it simple. We will talk about branches later, just to explain what that means. Branches will let you basically have different versions of a project on the same computer and branch off and mix and match them, and that kind of thing. So yeah, if you're on Windows, you'll either have to learn to use your own commands, which are pretty similar, or we'll give you a utility that will let you use the same commands as Linux and Unix and Mac. And that should work pretty well. But yeah, thanks for the short lesson, guys. We're going to have a lot of work on the homework. So basically, here is what the homework is going to be. I just barely create. So I have a repository on GitHub, and your job is going to be to fork it, clone it to your machine, make some changes to this readme.md file. That's the only file there is in the repo. Add a screenshot of a tweet that you've altered using inspect element somewhere in the folder. And then you're going to make the changes and push it back up to GitHub. And task 2 will be creating your own new repository on GitHub. So to do that, you just hit this right here, new repository, give it a name, and then follow the steps. make some changes to that repository, and then push it back up. The one thing I don't understand is the purpose of a comment. Is that a commit? Yeah, so each commit has a comment that goes along with it, and that's basically saying, here's what I did in this past commit, so that when you're looking, so let's, for example, let's look through this. So this is something that we don't plan on using, but just so you know it's there, we can do git log, and this will show us all of the past commits and what the messages were. So the message is what you're adding right here. So generally, you add something that's specific that can tell you what happened, so that if something goes wrong, you can go back to it. So the company I used to work at, we would always use Git for everything. And if we would push something live, there would be thousands of people on our site, and they would be seeing something broken. So the fastest way for us to go back and to fix things was just to revert our code to an older commit and then push that code out. And then we could figure out debugging what was wrong with this one in the meantime. But because we had all these snapshots saved and we had these messages there, we could just instantly roll back to an old one, push it out, and crisis averted, ideally. But yeah, that's it for this week, guys. Next week, we're going to get into some JavaScript and a little bit more CSS, but mostly JavaScript. And you will need to have at least a somewhat of a grasp of the command line and GitHub in order to complete that. So just so we don't put too much on you all at once, we broke that up into 2 lessons. So yeah, we'll look forward to talking to you guys next time. And that's going to be it for tonight. Quick lesson.